on Women's Day. Woo! There should be more people coming, but we want to start because we have so much to say, and we want to give a lot of chance as much as possible for you all to say things. So we want to say what we need to say and inspire you all. There's an amazing group of people in this room, women in this room, as you know, heads of, and connected to, the idea was global networks and local actions, and people here represent all sectors, philanthropy, foundations, nonprofits, businesses, government agencies. And 2 years ago, I had a birthday party, and I invited a lot of people to come and hear Senator Tim Kaine before he was.
Should have been.
And because he's one of my dearest friends. And out of that was born this idea of Women for Common Ground, because his PAC is Common Ground. And then last year, when we found ourselves in a different situation, we all came together because we wanted to do action. So was born Women's Civic Action Network, with the idea of doing action at the civic scale and aligning our missions and amplifying our resources and our impact. So it's been a year, and I'm an architect, so I wanted to really do action, and I've tried to put all this together with help from my friends and advisors and co-hosts, and hopefully now there is something that you all can participate in. So I wanted to bring these amazing women together. Thank you. It has truly been a labor of love that does not come alone, so I would like actually to ask at the end, I'm going to ask my advisors to stand up, and my co-host, thank you so much, and Nicole Muchnig, thank you so much for hosting us all and organizing all of this. But I do want to get to our panel because we have so much amazing things to discuss. And so without further ado, these three women are from the mayor's office, and they represent or are affiliated with global networks that are associated with global philanthropies from the Rockefeller Foundation to Bloomberg. And just briefly, as a lens, these foundations were, helping with things that the government can't do and institutions can't do. So they've set up these global networks from the 100 cities, which you will hear about, to C40, to other kinds of situations. So, excuse me, sorry about this. So I want them today to tell us some of the things that they are doing as representatives of those networks in our city, so that we, with the networks that we belong to and the resources at our disposal, can see how we can help implement and align and be stronger together and use our power as women. Because even if we don't have the executive power sometimes, the mayor or the governor or the president, we have a lot of power. We have a lot of power with our social capital and all of the resources that we have access to. So if you hear about what's going on in the resiliency plan, which connects all of the areas of our local government, and the sustainability plan, and the innovations office, I hope that today, we don't know what will come out of it because it's a room where it happens. You will be inspired, and after we go through our part, there will be lots of time for questions, and I hope that that part will be inspiring. And then at the end, there will be more time for networking, because this is about you and networking, and also about coming to some action. So with that, may I introduce, here we go. I'm so used to being short. All right, so I think rather than me introducing you, I would like you guys to introduce yourselves. But we have Lauren Faber, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer. We have Amanda Dafos, who's our Chief Innovations Officer. And we have Marissa Ahu, who is our Chief Resiliency Officer, who has just released this plan. Where's the plan?
It's behind me.
Okay, the plan. This plan was released from the mayor's office on Friday, and it is incredible. And so I hope that you all will learn more and take a look at that online. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for organizing this, and to your partners in doing it as well. This is a really exciting way to start the day. To see all these powerful and motivated faces in the room and interested in hearing what we're doing, you know, in the city, in Los Angeles, what we go to work every day as mission-driven, really. We're providing services for the city and really trying to propel Los Angeles and maintain its role, its global leadership role in the world, and that's something that the mayor takes very, very seriously. Quickly, you want to be introduced myself, but I'm Lauren Faber O'Connor, and I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for Mayor Garcetti. I've been with the mayor for the last 3 years. Prior career, always have been working in climate change and clean energy, from the international scale out in Washington, D.C., to slowly coming back west and realizing that the rubber hits the road at the, you know, it's more sort of local scale you get working for the state up in Sacramento, and then coming back down home to LA, growing up not far from here. And it really is, I was just telling some new friends here that when I was growing up, as passionate as I was about environmental issues, I never thought that my career would flourish here, that this wasn't necessarily, LA wasn't necessarily the place to develop and lead on the environment, and I had to go elsewhere. So I did, and, you know, kind of explained to my family that I wouldn't be back anytime soon, but it is the most exciting thing for me to be able to be back home and see not only how that's evolved, but what a leadership role that we have taken in the city, really as a model for the world, and to be able to carry out the mayor's goal of becoming the most sustainable city in the world is so exciting, and it brings these interested networks to us, like C40. And so you wanted to hear a little bit about C40, which is a global network of mega cities who are coming together to work on and solve climate change. And so it's about 90 cities from around the world. Every region is represented, and the mayor is the vice chair of C40. Currently, the chair of C40 is Mayor Hidalgo of Paris. And so this is a fantastic network and opportunity for us to learn from each other, from cities to learn from each other, to workshop new ideas. When ideas are working, to replicate and bring those to scale. You know, we work with London, Madrid, Buenos Aires, you know, different cities in China, Beijing, to test out certain things around clean electrifying our transportation fleet, understanding how we build our transit systems to meet the needs of our most vulnerable communities, looking at how we, most recently, one of the most exciting things that C40 has helped us do is when the president declared last summer that he would be pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, Mayor Garcetti was really one of the first elected officials in the country to come out and say, if the president is out, we are in. We are upholding the Paris Climate Agreement, and he took a significant number of US mayors with him to make that pledge. On the day that pledge was made, which is June 1st, we had about 60 to 70 mayors who came out and said that with us. By the end of that day, that number doubled. And by the end of that week, that number quadrupled. And this is an example of the mayor understanding the importance of networks as well. And so he has created his own domestic network of US mayors called Climate Mayors, working together to understand each other's challenges when it comes to fighting climate change, but also bring resources to cities small and large in red and blue states. We've got 47 out of the 50 states represented. If you know mayors, big or small cities in South Dakota, North Dakota, or Mississippi, you let me know, and I will go after them so that I can tell the mayor we've got all 50 states. But that's just a little bit of an opening, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, good morning. My name is Amanda Daflos, and I'm the mayor's Director of Innovation. And I also lead all the work that we do around gender equity. So I would also say just a tremendous happy International Women's Day. I see a ton of purple in the audience, so super excited. Also on the stage, which I have to do a little bit of coordination. But in my role, I've been with the city for about 2.5 years. The Innovation Office is what I like to fondly call a little bit of a startup in government. We were started by a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies. And we sort of had all the hallmarks of a startup, which was basically me in an office trying to figure out, okay, we have this grant and we have a lot of deadlines, we have to start doing things, what is that going to actually look like? And so that was in May of 2015. We went from being me and what I also fondly call a broom closet to now an office of about 12 people. And that office focuses on both gender equity. We also focus on a whole host of things that come under the umbrella of innovation. So for us, what innovation has meant is really about how we work with departments and residents in the city to problem solve. And so it's very much about problem solving. And so departments will bring, the mayor will bring, residents often bring issues to us. And we have the opportunity to say, okay, well, what departments and what community groups and really who is a part of this issue? And bringing those people together to actually study that issue, develop some form of a solution. It can be technology, it can be a change to a process, it can be any number of different things. It can be legislative. And then to actually go do that, and to do that with departments, again, do that with residents, and actually get things done. So for us, that's very much what innovation has been about. We are funded, as I mentioned, with a startup grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies. It's a 3-year grant, and their theory behind that was that they really want these startups to become permanent, bolted-on pieces of government. And so the city now is in the process of going through figuring out how it's going to keep the innovation team, because the things that I think we've delivered, my personal goal was to become invaluable to the city, so that the problems we're solving, the things that we're doing are things that are not just making local news, but making national news, so that we are leading, as Lauren was saying, and setting the example for what innovation looks like in government. And in a time where we have really 40% of government employees on the road to retirement really quickly, having an innovation in government isn't just sort of like a nice idea. It's actually necessary, because we absolutely have to be doing more with technology. We have to be training people on social media, because as an example, to recruit new people into government, we've got to be on social media. And to be on social media, we have to have government employees who understand how to do that, and programs that are sophisticated to allow us to do those kinds of things. So I'll also just say one thing about an example project to give you an idea of like what kinds of things we do. Somebody asked me what my favorite project was. At which point I shared it would be really hard for me to just like choose. I don't have kids, but if I had to choose a kid, it would be a little bit like that. But I think one of my favorite projects that we've been delivering, and I should note that we work across topics. So we've worked in housing, we've worked in business, we've worked in, right now we're working in policing, we're working in recruiting and hiring, we're working in sexual harassment, so a lot of what's happening now nationally, we're leading sort of the change and the reform for LA around that. And then we're doing a fair bit of work around a couple other things with departments. But one of my favorite projects was some of the work we're doing here around housing in the city. It wouldn't be a surprise to you that our homelessness rate in LA has gone up quite a bit. And we started work in 2015 looking at the question of housing supply. It was our theory that at the time we sort of had the idea that homelessness might go up because of rents. And so we did 2 things. One was look at what things we could bring online in terms of housing really quickly, and then 2, figure out how to help keep people in their homes. And so on the supply side, we started looking really closely at the different types of housing. So second units, also known as accessory dwelling units, granny flats, that is the type of housing that residents can actually bring online on their own. And so what we realized was that the city process was so confusing that what we wound up finding was that people were building these illegally in LA. And so there's a point of view in LA that these are bad, that these are, we don't want them, it contributes to density. But a lot of the work that we did really proved sort of that they're going to happen anyway. So we might as well, when we do them, let's make sure we're doing them well and make sure we're giving people instructions on how to do them. And also think about ways that we can actually incentivize people to do things like bring lower income individuals into that backyard housing. And so over the course of 2 years, we did a whole body of research. There's tons of data I could spend a lot of time telling you about. But what we were able to achieve and get done was really passing state legislation that clarifies the law, pass local legislation that clarifies the law, and then develop a series of tools that would allow us to actually inform people on how to do these really, really well. So we've seen a 700% increase in smart housing coming through, so people actually taking permits. We've seen a 700% increase in that in 1 year. And the city is now doing a lot to be able to make sure that we're handling that capacity and we're doing a good job with that. And we recently got a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies to actually now figure out how to take that and do more than already what we've done. So I will tell you more about that, but that's something that I'm super excited about. And for those that are interested in that topic, I know that we're going to talk about actions, and that's a topic that I have a long list of actions on for those that want to get involved.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Marissa Aho, and I'm Mayor Garcetti's Chief Resilience Officer. And we're celebrating quite a week this week with the launch of Resilient Los Angeles. However, resilience is not new to Los Angeles. This is a resilient city. And we have a history that has helped us to be more resilient. But in 2013, we were one of the inaugural members of 100 Resilient Cities. And then in 2014, Mayor Garcetti had a partnership with USGS and brought on seismologist extraordinaire Dr. Lucy Jones into our office. Yeah, she's amazing. And so Lucy worked in the city 4 out of 5 days a week with this technical assistance agreement with USGS. And she and the Mayor's Office of Public Safety and a Seismic Safety Task Force created Resilience by Design. And that is 1718, she and I sort of fight about this, but recommendations around strengthening our buildings, our water systems, and telecommunications. And so, like these two wonderful colleagues of mine, I arrived in about May of 2015 as well, and was tasked with implementing Dr. Jones's work. And then, also in addition, creating this little 180-page document that we released this week. So
That is everything.
yeah, you
in the
know,
city.
yeah. But I'm an urban planner, and by trade, and spent a little over a decade consulting to developers and landowners. I was a lobbyist to the city for 6 years. I sort of learned from the other side how the place worked, and then did a number of long-range plans. And so what I think, we can go into details about the strategy in a bit, but I think what I like most about it is that it sets a vision. It's definitely a long-range plan, but at the same time we worked really hard to organize it in a way where somebody could open it, read a part of it, and take action today. And I think that's what we're going to need to do more of, to be a more resilient city. We're going to need everyone to play a role in resilience building, and this is just a bit of a framework to get started.
Thank you. I have a second question, but just can you tell us a little bit about 100 Cities for those who don't know?
Yeah, so 100 Resilient Cities is a, let's see, I'll tell you the good story. So 100 Resilient Cities was started in 2013 by the Rockefeller Foundation, and it was in fact a way for them to celebrate their 100th anniversary. And I tell you, about 2 years ago, they were saying, well, I wish it would have been our 50th anniversary. Because in fact, standing up chief resilience officers in 100 cities around the world is quite the task. And so I'm happy to report today there are about 91 chief resilience officers in cities around the world. And it's a fantastic network. Through it, I have the pleasure of coordinating with peers. In fact, on Monday, I'm going to Mexico City as an example. We've been working really hard with Mexico City since their recent earthquakes and before on best practices and sharing what we're doing and what they're doing. But next week, 100 Resilient Cities is convening the chief resilience officers from, let's see if I can name them all, Wellington, Christchurch, Kyoto, Vancouver, San Francisco, LA, Calais, Colima, Quito, and Mexico City to talk about earthquake seismic resilience and how we can all be learning with and from each other, and what partnerships we can create and best practices we can share. And so that's one of a number of things that we get to take advantage of in being part of 100 Resilient Cities. And they funded my position for 2 years. They funded a portion of my deputy's position for 1 year. That time has since passed, and we're still here, which is great. And they'll continue to be partners, and the Rockefeller Foundation will continue to be partners with us through the implementation of the 96 actions that I also consider my pseudo-children at this point.
Perfect, thank you. So I was going to say, in one sentence, please tell us what a resilient and sustainable and innovative LA looks like to you. I don't know if that's possible. Or also, you know, I think what we're all interested in is metrics too. So if you want to combine that with what success looks like and, you know, how you measure it and what some of the hurdles are.
Sure. You want to start? Sure. Those are really great questions because it demonstrates that we have to be thinking critically about what are our goals and be very clear about them for our own work and clear about them for the community to understand what we're doing. And so I should have said the Sustainable City Plan, and you know, we all sort of can attest to how important plans are, but the Sustainable City Plan was released in 2015, and it's the first plan of its kind. And so a sustainable city, it's really trying to define what a sustainable city means for us. And what it means is it's memorialized here is a city that is looking at a long-term vision, understanding the challenges that we're facing regarding climate change, population growth, some of the other threats like seismic, technology improvements, and ensuring that we are protecting the environment and doing so in a way that is offering economic opportunity to Angelenos and ensuring that those benefits from these actions to protect the environment, to offer jobs, are distributed not just equitably across the city and across our residents, but actually ensuring that the most vulnerable residents are feeling and experiencing those benefits, that we're lifting those residents up. And that's what sustainability means, and we sort of redefined it and taken it out of just the more traditional, conventional environmental protection lens. It's certainly an environmental protections document, but when we look at the kinds of actions that we lay out, and we lay out a series of actions, of outcomes, about 90 of them as well. I guess he likes that, just under 100. And we've set targets for ourselves that both demonstrate where we're trying to head in the long term. So targets for 2025, 2035, but also in 2017. So remember, this came out, we developed it in 2014, it came out in 2015. So we set these early targets to say, are we even on track? You know, have we met these targets so that we're moving in the direction of those big monumental changes that we want to see over the decade and decades to come? Really excited to say that in the 2017 timeframe, we achieved 90% of our outcomes, which is really, really exciting to see. Thank you. And most of them are on their way. And actually, it's very useful to understand that we're not hitting a target. You know, we actually, and it sort of pains me to say, but we didn't hit our target for local solar capacity in the city. We have more solar in LA than any other city in the country, and I would venture, and I'm trying to get this statistic verified now, but I actually think any other city in the world. But what the mayor will say is, per capita, I mean, we're a pretty large city, so we should have more solar. But per capita, we're behind. And so we were behind our local solar goal, and it allows us to kind of look back and do some kind of good government and understand what programs were we in the middle of launching that were just getting underway, that now, you know, we can say are functioning better. Between the building department and the water and power department. We're so lucky that we have our own municipal utility. There's so much that we can do because we own our own and the largest municipal utility in the country. And so when it comes to water conservation programs, when it comes to clean energy, we can lead because it's our own decision. We don't have to wait for a regulatory body at the state level to tell the utility what to do. We do it together. And so we're embarking on some of the most comprehensive and ambitious projects to actually get us to under 100% renewable energy. Again, this is all part of the mayor's goals to adhere to the principles of the Paris Climate Agreement. And so we will be updating this plan to really embed the principles of the Paris Climate Agreement over the course of this year. We're engaging stakeholders across all the issues that the plan deals with. And I should say, the plan hits all walks of life, whether that's clean energy, our buildings, the built environment, water. You know, we are in a major drought, water-constrained world, and what does that mean for development, affordable housing, how we deal with transit, Resilience plays a direct role in the plan as well, and so, you know, when Marissa and I first started in and around each other, we found each other and we said, we're gonna meet regularly, aren't we? And you know, we are, you know, sister teams. We're all sister teams, and in fact, I should say that Amanda and my teams, we're part of the same office within the mayor's office, the Office of Budget and Innovation, which is a great place to be because we are part of the section of the mayor's office that holds the purse strings, and that, you know, that is a huge demonstration of your values. Another way to do it is to create accountability. And so the mayor created accountability on the Sustainable City Plan by doing a few key things. One, he directed all the general managers of all the city departments to appoint departmental chief sustainability officers. So I have my own network, I have my own army of sustainability officers across the city. And I think in the 3 years I've been here, almost 3 years I've been here, we have never missed a monthly meeting. And so we're talking a CSO from Water and Power, from Sanitation, from the Housing Department, from the Buildings Department, from the Zoo, from the libraries. When we think about the engagement opportunities and the outreach and education opportunities, it's incredible. And then the internal coordination that happens. One quick example that's really exciting about how things just come into play when you communicate and interact. We're in one of our monthly meetings, and our Bureau of Street Services, so our Chief Sustainability Officer and our Bureau of Street Services, stood up and said, you know, one of the goals in the plan is to reduce the urban heat island effect. This is a huge overlap between our resilience work and our sustainability work, is how we prepare for and become more resilient to extreme heat, one of the top concerns we have about climate change. And he got up and he said, you know, I really want to test this cool pavement, which is one of the things that we talked about in our sustainability plan, but I need some surface to test it on. I can't do it on road because we have to test it off road first before we put it on road, of course. I need it in a hot space and I need a large space. And he just kind of threw it out there, and our Rec and Parks Department, so our Chief Sustainability Officer for our Rec and Parks Department, stood up and said, I've got a rec center in the valley that, you know, we kind of need to repave that parking lot anyway. Let's try it. And that just got us going in one of the most successful programs that we have, in one of the areas that other cities come to us from all over the world, and media come to us from all over the world trying to understand what we're doing on Urban Heat Island and pioneering things like cool services. And the fact that we were able to do that started with just this meeting and putting our heads together.
So I think, you know, what innovation means to LA. I think, you know, we are sort of thinking about it, and the mayor is sort of thinking about it as a necessity. It's not really an option. We have to think about things in a different way. And when we think about, as I mentioned, about 40% of our workforce looking to retire, a lot of it comes out of that. And we're not alone in LA, right? A government across the country, we expect to see similar rates of retirement. So the question is, how do you do more with a continually less? But also, how do you actually bring new things into government that will help us be a responsive government? Meaning, how do we solve problems real time, and how do we actually address them with things that are new and different, and arguably a lot more efficient? And so I would give maybe two examples. One example is in some of the work we're doing right now with the LAPD. The very specific problem that we were asked to look at, and actually I'll back up and say that we work in about a 1-year time frame. So my team goes through 4 steps, if you will. There's a lot more, but 4 easy steps. One is some very, very deep research. 2 is really trying to articulate what the actual problem is. And so we can go into something thinking it's one thing, but most of the time we learn it's actually quite different. And then we spend a lot of time actually kind of in a lab format with residents and with our departments, thinking about, okay, well, what can we do to solve that problem? And then we move into delivery. So that all happens in the span of about a year. So it's quite rapid. We usually deliver in a portfolio about 14 or 15 projects. Each project has some specific metrics tied to it. So we're all holding ourselves accountable for things like, did we actually get more African American women in the door when we're doing recruiting and hiring? So we have some very specific metrics that go along with everything. So we report those certainly to the mayor and then also to Bloomberg. So a lot of our financial gates, if you will, for our grant are tied to performance. And I actually think, even though it creates a lot of gray hair in my head and a lot of stress and not that much sleep, I think it's a really great place for a government to be, and I think it's a really great relationship because it speaks to how we bring in a lot of ideas from other places, it speaks to how we share, it speaks to how we share and let other cities take what we're doing and use it for what's right in their city, and apply the idea but take it and do it someplace else. And so, back to my example, which was that right now we're working on police hiring. And the reason that we're working on it is because we now know that about, it's the same number, 40-ish%, closer to 50% of our LAPD will be retired, and not in the next 10 years, but by 2021. And so we should all be very nervous. Thank you, Marissa, for writing that into your plan. Because that's part of resiliency too, right? That's part of feeling safe, that's part of having healthy communities, that's part of having all the things that we know and appreciate. When you look at that number and then you break it down even further, it's 60% of African Americans will be gone from the LAPD. And those numbers, as you look at the different groups, become much more concerning. And so the mayor, knew that in his mind, he thought this is probably going to be a thing. Innovation team, go figure out what that is. And so that's now what we know, and so that's really helped crystallize and create a lot of urgency around, which there already was quite a bit of urgency around hiring. But it's been created urgency, awareness, and actual understanding about how we can recruit in a way that's now more thoughtful. So we're doing things like, hopefully you all saw, a campaign that we launched last week about it's a diversity campaign about recruiting into the LAPD. And you could ask yourself, well, why does that actually matter? And the reason why that matters, there's a body of work, there's academic research, there's all sorts of things that talk about a diverse police force being the most important thing to a healthy community, because it's important that when I go into a neighborhood, if I'm a policewoman, that people can see themselves in me, and that when they have an interaction with me, they feel like I understand. And if it's myself and a partner, and my partner's African American, it changes the way that we interact and changes the kind of conversation. We have one of the most diverse police forces in the country, actually. Depending upon the day, it's usually the first or second most diverse police force in the country. But as we move forward and as these things start to happen, it's really important that we focus acutely on hiring and recruitment. And so our team has worked on everything from this diversity campaign that I mentioned. The mayor put a press release out about it last week. It's gotten picked up by a lot of national media, which was my secret hope, because we actually have to get better at recruiting people from outside LA, not because we want them, but because we need them. We hire about 600 people a year. To give you an idea, there's 7,000 people in the process in any one given year, and only 600 make it through. As you would hope that that's true, right? Because we don't want just any old person becoming a police officer. We want people that are trained to carry the things that they carry and do a really important job in our city. But it makes the numbers game really, really important. And so we have 2 data scientists, I think, to just give you a sense of what innovation means to us as a city and to the mayor. On our team, we have 2 data scientists that are responsible for doing things like projecting retirement in the LAPD, predicting attrition. We now have a handle on all that. Tracking on a day-to-day basis now, which is so interesting for our personnel department and our LAPD to understand how many people are applying daily online, how many people are looking at these online social media ads. We're doing Facebook advertising for the first time as a city. We're monitoring it, so all the things the creepy stuff that Facebook does, we can understand that now, and that's huge for the city to be able to recruit, right? Because not only are 50% of our police people retiring, but we have to hire a lot of great young people, and so we have to be on Facebook, we have to be on Instagram, and we have to have compelling content. And so we're doing that kind of work, but we're also doing process changes that are really acute, but are moving people through this process in a way that they just were getting stuck and we didn't know why before. So we have project managers on our team, data scientists. I have a designer, actually 2 designers, so people that are really good at making things look pretty, but more than that, they actually understand how people use systems. Because I would not want to create a campaign. If I created a diversity campaign and the whole world didn't care about diversity or the way that we're telling that story, it falls on deaf ears, right? So we have a designer to sit and spend time doing research about who's going to be looking at this stuff. And in the case of the campaign we launched, it's young people. And what they want to hear, because they told us, we did surveys, was they want to hear stories of officers. They want to hear stories from people like you, about why officers matter and what they do and how all that resonates. So that's what we did. We created a campaign that's all stories about real lives of officers, real lives of community members, and the community piece is brand new and it's not been done before, and it's something that we're getting a lot of traction on, because it's interesting when you ask the CEO of the Downtown Women's Center what she wants to see in a police officer. That answer is really, really different than anyone actually thought. By making a video about it and actually sharing that information as an LAPD to bring more people like yourselves, because there is no age limit on becoming a police officer, it turns out. Anyone can do it, and if you want to, let me know, because that's another great way to get involved. It'll only take you 6 months to get through academy, and we can help you. But we've done a lot of really interesting things to change the pipeline too.
Is it for questions? Can we ask questions right now?
I think we're going to wait. I got a few more, and then we're going to open it. I know. Thank you.
So I'll end with that in police hiring. If you want to become a policewoman, let me know.
So what does success look like? First, I think I'll talk about what is resilience. We'll just start there, right? Because resilience is a challenge to define. And really for us, what it is how do we survive, adapt, and thrive when we're disrupted or when there's a catastrophic event. So most of my conversations end in doom and gloom. I'm gonna try and not get there today. But I mean, what that really looks like is we've had so much success with our seismic resilient work, but that's one issue, and that's one shock, right? And so the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years is really to look at how do we strengthen the community fabric on a regular day or on a blue sky day, so that we're able to bounce back better when we hit a disruption or a catastrophic event. And we've seen 2017 did nothing but illustrate, and the beginning of 2018, why when these catastrophic events come to communities, the people, places, and systems that are most vulnerable are disproportionately affected by the emergency or by the interruption. And so trying to figure out what we can do in advance so that it isn't really about disaster recovery, it's really about identifying the challenges that we can fix today. And there are so many of them. Every week there's a new moment where I'm just amazed at what we've gotten ourselves into and how we need to work together to get ourselves out. And so the resilience strategy has 5 themes around disaster preparedness and recovery, climate adaptation, which Lauren and my teams worked on together, infrastructure modernization, economic security, and then leadership and engagement. And we did a lot of outreach and workshops and focus groups at the beginning of this process and really learned that maybe the city was not doing the best job at engaging people in these conversations. And so that has been a consistent theme of how do we get people involved. And so one of the ways that we structured the strategy and the work that we're doing is really to get at that the scales of Los Angeles. And you all know we're a huge city, a huge geography, so many different neighborhoods and villages within a common area. A lot of people don't know whether they live in the city or not. And that's just the way that it is. It makes us very special. So the strategy has 4 chapters, and so 15 goals, 96 actions. But those 4 chapters are so important and are my favorite part, because the first chapter is about what Angelenos can do, what families can do, what small businesses can do, what property owners can do. If you read nothing else, we put them first so that someone could open the document and see existing resources that the city has. The second action is about how we as a city need to lead by example by making sure that our employees are prepared. They all serve as disaster service workers in an emergency, knowing what that is and what they should do about it. Given how many individuals are retirement age, that plays a more important role in terms of if we have a major emergency and you're retirement age, are you going to come be a disaster service worker? I don't know. The second chapter is really about neighborhoods and this idea that we can have a lot of citywide goals, and we do, but if we don't get to the individual shocks and stresses in a neighborhood, and what is most important to Venice may be very different than Chatsworth. And we need to engage the communities in those conversations to figure out, is wildfire a risk? Are tsunamis a risk? Is lack of open space contributing to or not contributing to resilience? For instance, in Koreatown, that's an issue. And so how do we look at that on a block scale or on a neighborhood scale, and how do we get those neighbors involved in that conversation? And then the third chapter is around the city, and really about solving for more than one thing. And that a lot of our work is de-siloing these conversations and really working collaboratively with various entities internal to the city and externally to do more data-driven decision making, to use technology to solve some of these problems. We're piloting a predictive modeling for seismic right now that will help us understand after an earthquake where damage is likely to be done, so that we can prioritize our response. And things like that are really exciting. And then the fourth chapter is recognizing that we have a global role in resilience, we have a national role, we have a state role, and so looking beyond our borders, because all of these issues that we're dealing with when we're talking about sort of shocks and stresses that we're susceptible to, and we're susceptible to so many, they don't know borders. And so we really need to be working with our neighbors in other communities in the region, at the state level, at the federal level, and globally, and different disciplines and different sectors, in order to make sure that everybody understands that they have a role to play in resilience, and that most people are actually increasing our resilience on a daily basis, and maybe they don't call it that. And so how are we a little more intentional about looking at the things that we can do in advance of something happening, so that when that thing happens, we're better prepared and better able to survive and thrive after an event.
Thank you. That was perfect too. So, of course, we are taking longer, but it's so interesting. I hope that you guys are as interested in learning as much as I am. I really appreciate. You can see why I got these three together, and thank you for doing that and highlighting it. I'm going to just do one last question to lead into our audience, because it's really about how you all can participate and what you all can do, and how you're going to go talk to your networks and think about what you can do in your businesses and philanthropies and foundations, and what, I'm just saying this in case anyone leaves before, we want to build this into something that we can all participate in. So my final question before we open it up is, where are some opportunities that you see for philanthropies and the private sector to play a role in, more resilient, sustainable, and innovative LA that could spark the conversation?
Our brainstorm list from last night.
Yeah, sure. I can be the bearer of unsexy news. Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, as you can see, we are all beneficiaries in some way by philanthropy, and certainly by private sector. Well, I'll start with philanthropy, since you did. While I am not funded by philanthropy, I'm internal to the mayor's office, a number of my staff are, and a number of our projects are. And so that contribution is truly invaluable. And so when I say it's not sexy, it's because a lot of what we're able to, a lot of the resources that we're able to gather that make such a huge difference in our effectiveness and our ability to get work done and engage is when we do have resources to support people and plans. And I know that that is not the most motivating thing per se, but it is foundational for us. I just can't emphasize that enough, how foundational it is. And it's exciting because it creates our army. It also creates accountability by having, by committing ourselves publicly offering that transparency, that's something that then engages inherently a community of actors who can come to us and say, oh, one of your priorities is to build out pilots across the city to demonstrate how you can combine renewable distributed generation and on-site storage capacity to do a number of things. One, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce our dependence on fossil energy. Two, to make us more resilient in a time where if we are subject to a natural disaster and we lose power, that we have these nodes of energy and we're able to continue operating. And three, the ability to bring in new technologies and operate and train, whether that's our personnel, our firefighters, our building department on how to use these types of systems. That would be able to be communicated better with those types of resources. So that's kind of a basic example. But I raise the idea of pilots because that there's so many ideas and projects that we're looking to implement over the coming year about how we demonstrate a zone in the city that is completely fossil fuel free. How we demonstrate how communities are interested in using certain types of technologies or transitioning from a car culture to using public transportation or ensuring that a new bike share station is successful. What are the kinds of engagement opportunities we have around those? I'm going to stop there because I know that there are other things that we've all talked about we want to get out there, but that's just a taste.
I think I would echo everything that Lauren said, and I would also say that as someone that came into government from the private sector and has thought a lot about how folks can really help change city government, I think the one thing that for me has really become clear is being able to be at the table with patients, because we're also talking about systems change in every one of the things that we do, whether I'm talking about policing or housing or we're talking about resilience or we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about changing city government, and it's not just LA. We're talking about changing all governments to be responsive to the way that we live today. And so any one funder or any bank or any private organization, I think that, one of the things, and I'm not just saying this because my grant funding came from them, but I think one of the things I really respect about Bloomberg is that they're willing to be at the table, and they're not telling me what to do, they're letting me tell them what I think should be done. And then they're spending the time saying, well, that data looks a little funky, are you sure about that? And like, oh, well, that idea maybe isn't the best idea to get as much attention as it really should. And then, in terms of tangible things we can do tomorrow, I mentioned that we got this grant from Bloomberg. It's a mini grant, it's $100,000. But what they're trying to do with that grant is help us test stuff. So we are literally going to be doing prototyping of homes and prototyping of a brand new program in the city to make it clear how to actually get a permit to build an ADU. And how to do it in a well-designed way that Lauren would approve, and that Marissa would approve, and that the mayor would approve, and that we'd all feel good about, but also would house residents that may have been homeless. So if you're interested in something like that because you have a design background, an architecture background, whatever the case may be. And then of course from the point of view of policing, we're touching everything from process to technology to marketing. And so if anyone here works for a marketing agency, I actually desperately need you because we want to do a campaign around Asian Pacific Islander women. We have 93 of them left in LAPD. That's 10,000 people. And so there's very few people that are Asian Pacific Islander, but as you know, we have Koreatown and Chinatown and places that actually need representation, not just from API women, but from API men, and can actually speak and interact in ways that matter, as well as African Americans. So for those that are interested in that, I'd love to chat with you as well because we need some really great help there. And again, the city we don't tell our story, so we do a lot of really amazing things that you don't know about because your life works. And when your life works, it means we're doing a good job. When your life doesn't work, it means maybe we need to fix it. So you don't hear about all the cool things we're doing to make your life better. But in the places where we really need help, it's the places we don't spend money. And that oftentimes is the foundational stuff, and then the marketing and the telling the story, because it's hard to justify that, right? Taxpayers would get mad, the media might say a bunch of things. But it still has to be done because we have to recruit, and we have to have systems to put people through. And we have to have systems that can measure all the great work everybody is doing in the city to tell you some story at some point.
version, I don't have a printing budget for. So that's the paper.
But it's all online.
It's all
I read
online
it
because
last night
we're a
online.
green city, and so
Yeah.
that's part of it. But you have the small one because that has the link to the mayor's website that you can find the rest of this information on. I would just add specifically in terms of projects, to echo sort of the media and marketing aspect, one of the actions in the resilience strategy is around messaging around preparedness and having a coordinated preparedness campaign. There was a meeting with a number of preparedness organizations that I was in about 6 months ago, or maybe a little longer, and the messaging, turns out everybody was giving the community different messages. So, 1 gallon of water per person per day for 3 days used to be the message. I'm not sure that actually got out very well, and that's no longer the message. It's really about preparing people to be self-sufficient for 7 to 14 days. So those of you in the audience who think you're crazy by having gallons of water in your homes, you're not. I have 10 gallons in my car. And so, seriously. So how do we launch a coordinated preparedness campaign that lets people know and then provides, our most vulnerable with some of those resources? If I can't figure out what I'm cooking my family for dinner tonight, I'm not gonna go get extra water. And that's just the reality. Additionally, a lot of resilience work is very fundamentally about knowing your neighbors. And because neighbors are going to be first responders in an emergency, the city does not have the resources to be there right away. It's going to be neighbors helping neighbors, and if you don't know your neighbors, or if somebody is vulnerable and hasn't made contact with their neighbors and they don't know to check on an elderly person or someone who's lacks mobility or whatever that might be, or people who have pets, and having their neighbors know they have pets. Those are parts of people's families, and having those established connections. And so one of the strategy recommendations is to start a program that would help neighborhoods just have a block party, not make it doom and gloom, do something fun in order to get to know their neighbors better. So
Make
that,
your resiliency kit.
yeah, anything. And so trying to figure out how exactly we implement everything that we just said we were going to do. We'll need a number of partners in many communities and with many resources that we currently don't have.
Thank you. That was perfect. I definitely want to open it up to all of you, and we wanted to have some time at the end to also network. In case, again, people leave, I want you to know, you got a program and a little postcard that has kind of what we're trying to do. You got a business card with connection, because, as I said, I tried to set this up so that it will help us all now. You've got a postcard, a form that this is how it will work. If you fill out this form and you say the things that you're interested in, and it's online, but it's also here, and if you want to do it today before you leave, then we can start to coordinate, and the things that you say that you're interested in, from housing to environment to whatever it is, to other, we can start to connect, because the idea of Civicas is that it's a feminine plural of women relating to citizens and cities. And what does it mean to be civic, and what does it mean to be a citizen? And you guys, I'm so inspired and grateful and thankful that you were here and shared this with us. But this is just a small portion, and we have, I've got like 1,500 people already in this database that are not all members. I want you all to become members. I want you to, if possible, I've done all of this. I need to hire people to help, so I'm asking you to do $250 to be a member. You can put your breakfast fee of $250 towards it, and then we can really build something and partner with you. And these are the little pamphlets that you'll get, and I just wanted you to take a look later. I've set up this website with resources. There's like 300 resources on here. You can say more resources, because you don't have to start something new, but there's lots of networks here that can, apply to things that you're interested in, that you can help support, or that you're related to. So this is about networking networks. There's news that's related to all of these things that you have said. every week, this is a week's worth of news. This is a weekly in 10 categories, things you might have missed that you might want to catalyze conversation. There's the membership. When you do your membership, if you could write down the network that you are either a part of or represent or support or would like to represent, because this is about bringing your resources and amplifying your resources. So what do we have that we can bring together at the civic scale? And then there's going to be then there's events. There's a collective calendar, because if everybody puts together the events that they're doing, we should all know and be able to support each other. Because truly, we are stronger together. And we want to also do some projects that we can talk about later. So with that, please, anybody have a question? Do you need to pass it around?
Thank you. We hear a lot about the opioid epidemic nationally and meth epidemic, and it impacts homelessness, city budgets for the hospital. What innovation plan and how are you partnering with each other and within the community to address this problem?
So I know this is a subject that we've been talking about a little bit in the office about what we can do. And so we're really, I think the conversations I've had have been at that, where should we be putting our effort? What is our role? How can we specifically address those issues? If you have ideas, I think now would be the time to connect and share them, because that's where we're at in terms of the conversations that I've had.
Just a couple of examples, when the mayor, when he talks to us about his approach to homelessness, this is something that he just, his brain does not turn off when it comes to what is he putting everything he can to be addressing and eradicating homelessness. And he thinks about the underlying causes, and he knows that it's trauma, it's affordability, and it's addiction. And we unfortunately we don't have a health department in the city. The health protection department is actually the county. So it's about partnerships. And we were really lucky to have when the country went in one direction in DC and elected our current president. In Los Angeles, we did some amazing things, including passing a couple of measures that would bring funding to offer services and housing to the homeless, understanding that it's really a combination of both, that you can't really provide services but not give someone the dignity of a place to go home, or vice versa. And so we are using, through Proposition H and HHH, this combination. And what he's also seen is that in order to gain the trust of a homeless person and understand that you are here to help them, it actually requires about a dozen touches. And so the amount of resources needed just to create kind of a volunteer army of people who are trained to be able to engage at that level and get that kind of trust, to be able to bring someone in from the streets, not far from where they live, on the streets, and be able to begin that process, that also is an entire body of work where we're building out that volunteer army so that we can go back and back and back again until we get them off the street.
How much do you work with other countries to look into prevention and training of officials? Like, I raised my hand when Amanda was talking about policing. I know that the policing in Germany and the training is very, very different than the one how it's done in America. And there is a very, very different outlook how to do it. And I would think that those kind of conversations would be very, very beneficial when you are stuck or when you're thinking what else is there to do. The same goes for homelessness and housing. What are the prevention measures in other countries that also have high poverty? But how come that there is more homelessness in America, let's say, than in Germany, where also poverty actually is a big issue, but the homelessness is not? So I would think that with these wonderful campaigns of different cities, that there is really a resource you can tap into. And everyone loves Los Angeles all over the world. So you would probably be opened with open arms.
I'm happy to at least take a first step at the training part. I would say that, in our case, one of the things that we've been able to do is, because training is really important, and so in the case of LAPD, because you asked the LAPD piece, we've worked with many cities in the US and abroad actually to study a lot of what they're doing. So when I was mentioning sort of how we work, we spent a fair bit of time studying other jurisdictions so that if there are great things going on, that we can meet with them and then bring those things to Los Angeles. And so from the point of view of studying sort of the way things work and the way that, in our case, recruiting and hiring is happening, we did that exact thing. And so some of what you would see show up in Los Angeles, you will now actually see even the sheriff doing some of what our team has delivered, because that's what should be happening, right? If we do something well, then we want to see the sheriff in LA copy it, and make it better, and then give it back to us. But we also want to see it happen in Denver and New York. And so we've been really open, and I think we have found, just as cities, you'd be surprised, I think even I was surprised at how open and invested in each other's work we all feel. And then there are these networks that we've all touched upon that I don't know if they existed in the way that they do now, but I meet regularly also with, there's 29 innovation offices around the world that are a part of this one network, a formal network, and we meet often. And I was telling somebody that was asking me a question earlier about the networking piece that we launched something about the rent stabilization ordinance about a year and a half ago. It's because we found that people actually just didn't really know what rent stabilization is in LA, and as a New Yorker, I grew up in New York. I mean, I knew everything, right? Because it was just, I knew, and there's like so you don't ever want to like leave one of the, no, but people don't know that here, and it turns out that 2/3 of our rental units are actually covered by RSO. So that's a big mismatch in terms of how many people know about it and don't. And the reason that I bring that up is because what we did, there was a whole series of process things, there was a marketing campaign, all of that. In Syracuse, small city, right? They got very interested in what we did, and now a year and a half later, they've taken that. They speak with our director of rent stabilization, and then our team, and they're taking the best of what makes sense for them, and then they're making it better for Syracuse with the idea that we can hopefully take back what they do. So on the training piece and the rolling other things out, I mean, I think that's at least what you would hope to see in city government, and I would say that from my view, we need to do much more of that because there's so many cities that are doing great things, but that is there, and that is happening.
And then I have just one very quick example, and that is about a year and a half ago, myself and our director of immigrant affairs were able to go to Athens for a convening around the refugee, migrant, immigrant crisis in Europe primarily. And the role that we played was really to talk to the different cities that were represented about how our city, our mayor, our government embraces the immigrants that are in this city, and that we're proud that 40% of our small business owners are immigrants, and so on. But at the same time, I quickly realized that the refugee crisis that Greece and the chief resilience officer from Paris was there, and a number of other people were experiencing was very parallel to the homelessness challenges that we have here. And so a number of months later, I was able to bring our director of homelessness to the U.S. Islamic World Forum, where we continued that conversation with the mayor of Hamburg and a number of other leaders about how we can learn from rapid housing of refugees in terms of applying that to the homeless that we have here, and what lessons and best practices can be shared. So I think there is great opportunities through these networks, and just in general, it's the century of the city to share best practices with other cities around the world.
There's a lot of questions. I want to get to more questions. I just wanted to say, in the interest of networking and the idea of networking, we want you all to network with each other too, because there's so many amazing women, and that's part of the whole idea of Civicas. But this was the time for networking, but we have more questions, so I think you want to ask more questions. But again, you know, it's a two-way street. Like the city is sharing with us what they have evolved into. And I think when I spoke to them before, it was like, how can we take that to the next level? And then what would the feedback from that be? So perhaps we were talking about reconvening this group in, 4 to 6 months to say, what were some of the actions that came out of it? What can we actually do that we could follow up on? What are some preliminary? Because I think you guys have done such a great job of setting the stage in so many ways, but we fill a gap. And we also have the potential to set a standard for women's civic groups of leaders in other cities around the world and around the country. So my goal and my advisors and my colleagues, and I think all of you here would like to be able to do something that we could share and prototype and model. So with that, I just want to say that before anyone else leaves, so we can ask more questions and then find out how we can, follow up and really have metrics and things that we could actually follow up with. Jean?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. You know, are you aware that the Red Cross has this program where they go in and they train, and I think it's just great for all of us. They go in and they train you to organize, like, not a block party, but a meeting. Like, they give you pamphlets and you knock on doors around your neighbors and you invite them into your home and you all get each other's information and you tell each other how to build an earthquake preparation kit and you see how to turn off the valves and all that kind of thing. And they train you, and they train one person in your community, and then you can do exactly what you were saying, but the Red Cross has that system already built in. So I'm gonna actually do one because I don't know my neighbors. You know.
So the Red Cross has great resources. The Cool Blocks program is another one that's being piloted in the city that has phenomenal resources. The Los Angeles Emergency Management Department has a Ready Your LA Neighborhood, which is based off of Map Your Neighborhood, that's about to be released. And there are so many resources in terms of putting together a preparedness plan for a multifamily building or a block or with your neighbors.
Yeah.
And we don't care which one you use, you just need to use one of them.
We'll
Maybe we
post
can
all
put
of
it on
that
the
too.
website.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we'll post that, and also, you didn't mention that in the plan, there's a place you can, or even in this thing, you can sign up to be trained and there's also, you're putting a chief resiliency officer in all the departments. I thought
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah,
Like
lots
huge.
going on. So CERT training is another opportunity in the city that the fire department does. And then building off of the success in the city on standing up the departmental chief sustainability officers. Part of the executive directive that the mayor signed on Friday was to require 28 departments, hopefully more, to appoint chief resilience officers in the departments by the end of April.
So first of all, thank you so much for bringing us all together, and I love the preparedness party idea. Maybe that's the next step to come out of this. I just wanted to voice support because we've worked a lot. The foundation I run, the Goldhurst Foundation, has supported a lot of work in the mayor's office, whether it's been a plan or a fellow, or whether it's been part of a grant in a larger grant to set up a department. And so I think there are a lot of different ways, even with small amounts of money, bringing people together that you can be very effective. I would say from a philanthropist perspective, it's one of the highest leverage opportunities available if we're all working on education reform or environmental sustainability or whatnot. The opportunities to work with city government, especially with wonderful leaders like you all, you can kind of flip a switch and render the issue you're trying to work on obsolete. I mean, I'm being a little bit optimistic there, but really. So I think that I just wanted to say, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about different tactics we've employed in different ways in which we've worked with the city, and we'd also worked with the former White House, and we had put different fellows in different places. So I just want to voice my support from that perspective.
Thank you for all your support,
Thank you.
really.
Of course.
Thank you guys.
I wish you all could meet each other, and, we could go around the room, which we can't do now, but hopefully because, looking around like what LA 2050 has done, and, part of it is that we all have connections and networks and resources, and somebody else may be doing something so related to what you're doing that you don't need to duplicate your efforts, but you could really work together if you knew what those were. So, especially when I look at what's happening with LA 2050, that inspires me. Like, what are all the people who aren't winning doing that? How can we all help
And
use those resources?
one other, catalyzing moment that we have to all be thinking about is the Olympics.
Yes.
It is a huge
We are thinking of
opportunity
that.
for
River.
us. Exactly, but
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of how we are using, and the mayor very smartly is using such an amazing and exciting moment that everyone, really most everyone in the city can get behind with a lot of enthusiasm to accelerate projects, to motivate investment, and to really change the way we're thinking about tearing down barriers to make sure that all the things we want to have the Olympics deliver in the next 10 years, which really means you have to start now. So it is, whether that's building out our transit system, ensuring that we have sort of an entire kind of zero emissions highway, ensuring that we are zero waste, a number of things to say.
And it's cooler in the summer.
Exactly, that it's a safe, cool, healthy, our air quality, a huge issue and something that the Olympics, the IOC cares a lot of.
More equitable tree canopy
And
is in there.
precisely, thank you, exactly. So these are all, that's just a list of it. So if those are things that you're interested in, these are things that we are, working on in real time.
Any other? Nicole?
Have you thought about taking this sort of presentation to high schools and local colleges to engage those very motivated people?
That's a fantastic idea.
Love to.
There's a consortium of girls' schools, if you want to keep it female
Yes.
to begin with.
We have a lot.
And then beyond, because I think we probably have a lot of, a lot of foot
Or
soldiers
maybe a
in that
video
region.
that you can, so to leverage your time, like a
Yeah.
video that then you could
Yeah.
distribute to schools.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Especially
It's a great
now
idea
wants
because
to make
we truly are actively trying to also be the face of recruiting in the city, right? In
Right.
some way, all
Well,
of us are
And
that.
it's telling the story.
Yeah.
It's what you were saying, it's telling the story. My daughter Nikki
If you
just
could
said
get it
somebody
to colleges, yeah.
We have resources to help do that.
Yeah.
That's something we could definitely do. Sheila back there is, I'm on the board of this thing called Action Civics LA. And, they have programs and curriculum that go into schools. We've got lots of representatives from different
Yeah.
schools and training the next generation of civic leaders, whatever their sector is. You guys are an inspiration.
Yeah.
If something like that, if that's the action that comes out of today, I love that one.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane.
I really appreciate what all of you are doing. It's very exciting. I'm an urban planner by background as well,
Yeah.
so. One of the really foundational features of LA is our residential segregation and the inequality that is reflected in the way the city is organized geographically. I heard some things that each of you were saying that are in some ways designed to help overcome that. Certainly you were talking about economic security, and I wonder to what degree that is a lens that you're looking at your work through, and to what degree you are involving community organizations or in lower income communities so that they become spokespersons and
Right.
actors for their own benefit.
I have a recent example. We were beneficiaries of a grant by the state through the state's climate program that raises funds from polluters, essentially. And we were grants or local water conservation supplies. How do we find a partner to help retrofit some schools to do cooler surfaces and plant a couple thousand trees in Watts alone? So this has allowed us to bring private sector, public sector, and the community groups together to embark on what we just started as a 3-year project. And so that is a crazy timeline, which also includes public housing, affordable housing, to be able to transform Watts. But at the same time, when we're transforming a community like Watts, we don't want to displace the community. And so having that component and the monitoring that we need to have and the programs that we need to put in place to prevent that kind of displacement, and that's something that the I-team has been leading on, is part and parcel with making that program a success. So that's something that we just solidified the grant. It was my first day back from maternity leave. It was so exciting because we started working on it before I was even pregnant. And so, now we're just getting started.
Sounds
Two babies.
exciting.
2 babies. Nice meeting you.
The only thing I would add is I think from the macro level also the city's really applying the lens of equity to really everything that we do. And so you'd see it in all of our work, just asking the question of, well, even when we're talking about something like transportation, the woman who leads our Department of Transportation, this year we've been working with her to say, okay, well, have we thought about the fact that when women ride transportation, they're going to stop, it turns out, they'll have 6 stops in a day versus men who have 3 stops, I think. So basically double the number of stops. So if we're thinking about sort of the quality of the experience and how we make, at a time when we're making investments in transportation, if we take those things into account from the point of view of equity, even in the gender space, those kinds of questions are really important, not just to ask, but to actually take into account when we're doing that planning. And so I would offer that just from the macro level that we as the mayor's office, and the mayor has been a national champion really on equity. The mayor is frequently out talking about specifically gender equity because we've been able to actually transact some significant results so quickly. For the first time in the city's history, we have more than 50% of our boards and commissions are now more than 50% of our boards and commissions are, all of our boards and commissions are now more than 50% women. And at a time when the mayor came into office, when the mayor came in, we had several commissions that had no women on it, period. And so now we've moved from a place where not only are there no all-male commissions and boards, but now there's just greater equity and more than 50% on all. So we've been very deliberate, and I think that's a really good example of just how deliberate, but at the same time applying that lens to the services that the city delivers, because there are services that affect all of your lives. It's about gender, it's about where you live, it's about your income, it's about sort of all the things that LA is about. But making sure that our departments are not forgetting that that's a thing to think about when we think about something as inherent to our lives as transportation, just as one example.
Just before, because it is 10:30, I want to be respectful of your time, I just want my co-host to stand up for a second. Thank you so much. Please. For all the help you've done. I want my advisory council to stand up for a second, please. You guys. These women give me goosebumps. They've been there for me to talk to and listen to and be so supportive, and I really, 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 really appreciate it, and hope that we can continue to do something great together. If anybody has more questions and you want to stay a little longer, we can do that. But this has just been so awesome. Thank you guys.
Join online so you don't have to
Yes,
put
you
all
can
this
join
stuff.
online. All of this is